truth be told, I've thought about this topic a lot over the last month, but every single time I've thought about it, I thought of Nickelback lyrics. Never made it as a wise man, couldn't cut it as a poor man stealing. I don't have any clue why, but I just needed to share that. When I really put my mind to it, I thought about how shitty dating has been for me in the last year. And a lot of that has been my own personal anxiety, my insecurities, my fear of rejection. I'm making sure my fly is up right now. All of that. But I also have no Riz, which for those of you who don't have TikTok, that means game. So I have no game at all. I am once the ice is broken, he's a great time kind of guy. But I have no clue how to break ice, never have and probably never will. A lot of people don't realize my insecurities because mostly I have no problem doing things like this, so people don't understand or they don't believe me or they say, well, that can't possibly be true. But I mean, I know my truth, so why are you telling what my truth is? I don't know. So a lot of dating apps have been my way around anxiety, and of course there is a lot of rejection there. But it's from afar, so that's perfectly fine with me, and that works. But at the same time, I also have no game, so I find a lot of times my conversations end prematurely because the person who I matched with doesn't think that I can really hold a conversation. So that's not always the best, but when I do match with someone and I vibe with them and I find them attractive, it's really exciting. But then comes a date. And for those of you who aren't on all the apps, it's truly really hit or miss. Half the time I find that people use pictures that may not necessarily reflect how they truly look in real life. I blame that on society, but that's a whole other topic. The other half of the time, you converse really well and everything's going great, and then you meet in person and no chemistry whatsoever. Both of those things happen, but sometimes when both of them happen, it's not really a great date, and I recently had both of those happen to me at the same time. Everything leading up to the date was fantastic. We exchanged the same old informational pieces. We had great banter. We had the same sense of humor. All the right things. It was really exciting. We discussed hobbies. I mentioned Story Slam and how I was kind of nervous because I didn't have a story picked out for the event. I mentioned the Nickelback lyrics. We bonded over ironically liking Nickelback. So it was great, and she said, well, maybe our date will inspire your story, winky face, and that was an emoji. She didn't write out winky face. That would be like a red flag, unless it was like part of her humor, then it'd be a green flag, but yeah, that's how complicated things are. Now, I sometimes, in all honesty, count my chickens before they've hatched, and sometimes I count my chickens before I even have the eggs. So in my mind, I was gonna invite her here tonight, and I'd tell a story about our quirky first date, and I was imagining our 2 children and their future together, and quickly my brain brought me back to reality and said, Corey, you've thought like this before, and you probably shouldn't. And that was good. That was good for me. So the evening of our date came about, and she picked a meeting place of a diner. She wanted to be able to hear me instead of strain over the loudness of a bar, which, okay, she picked the venue. She wanted meaningful conversation. I was already picking out rings in my mind. It was great. But once again, I was brought back to reality when I arrived at the diner. Has anyone ever went to an unfamiliar, crowded diner to meet a stranger you met on the internet when you thought she had a table, but in all reality, she was standing out the front whole time, so you were kind of like wandering around the diner for 10 whole minutes? I have. And when I finally found out, it turns out I had missed her at the front. I hadn't recognized her. And so right there, the piece of not recognizing her was unfortunate. But I said, we had great text conversation. It could still be a great time. But every single thing that we discussed kind of fell flat when we were finally meeting. It didn't resonate or flourish like it did through text. But I wasn't giving up. I mean, I was lucky enough that I had a date. So I tried to think of things we could talk about to pass the time by for the next hour at least. We got on the topic of anxiety. It was great. I felt really comfortable when we were discussing it, and it made me feel relief about not liking meeting new people and just wishing we could live outside of societal norms. But it was nice, and even more relieving was when the date came to a natural end. There was, no excuses, no stretching out conversations for hours. It was just a mutual understanding of not having any kind of feelings or interest towards one another. So I'm glad this both date of both things that could have not been fortunate in meeting up went a lot better than it was. And although my white picket fence daydream that I had in mind didn't go quite as planned, if anything, one thing was true. Our date really did inspire my story tonight.